My wife and I have purchased over $7.5 million worth of property before the age of 30. Oh, and I'm about to turn 30 in about 6 days. I've devoted my 20s to making more money to set myself and my family up for more choices in our future. So have you ever wondered what it takes to build a multi-million dollar property portfolio in your 20s? Well, I sure did. So let me tell you how we actually did it. And it's not gonna be through your 9-to-5 grind. To be honest, we took some extreme measures. So in this video, we're gonna break down 4 key steps of exactly how we hustled our way to a multi-million dollar portfolio to now give us choices as we move towards our 30s. And I'll even share with you my perspective on how to do this in today's market, because a lot of people will argue that it was different back then, which is true. Times change, and so you need to adapt. But let's go all the way back and recap on our story and how we were able to create over a $7.5 million property portfolio before my 30th birthday. Now, when Emily and I started to look to invest in property 10 years ago, we almost had no money to our name. We just got married at the ripe old age of 20 and 21, and we had less than $5,000 to our name. We were renting a very small apartment on the south side of Brisbane. We were paying $320 a week when we could have been renting a much nicer place for $400 to $500 per week here in Brisbane. But this is where our journey began. It was absolutely a team effort between Emily and I to work towards building a multi-million dollar property portfolio. And so with only a few $1,000s to our name, our first goal was to save some money and start early. And this leads me into point number 1. It is to start early. If you're in your early 20s, start thinking about property investing early. You're going to need to get capital together. And so that's exactly what we did. We started saving. Now, we didn't know when we were going to buy our first property, but we knew we needed to get some savings together to put as a deposit down on our first place. We looked up government grants, stamp duty concessions, first home super saver schemes, which are a bit of a mouthful, but we worked together to save our money and build up a deposit. Now, 2 years passed. It took us over 24 months to save around $66,000. And we were able to use the first home super saver schemes to save about $5,000 each on our taxes as part of our saving strategy. Now, there is a massive advantage to starting earlier in your property journey. The reason being, the earlier you buy that first property, the earlier you have capital in the market. Property is an amazing asset because it allows you to use leverage to your advantage. So we took that $66,000 and we were able to acquire an $800,000 asset just 2 to 3 kilometers north of Brisbane CBD. We moved into the property ourselves, we renovated to add value. We even ended up renting some rooms down the track to increase our income on our first place with some boarders, which definitely helped with the mortgage. So we had a massive advantage in starting early because by the age of 23, we'd broken into the market and bought our very first home. Now, it wasn't smooth sailing. There were problems all along the way, from financing, from renovations on the home, through the management down the track, but we were willing to take on those projects and willing to take on those problems and come up with solutions. And that's where we're able to break into the market and get that exposure and get that leverage on that $800,000 purchase price. So look at your own situation. Do you currently have some cash, maybe some stocks or some crypto? Can you get enough capital together and have a chat with a broker or a bank to look at your serviceability and your borrowing capacity so you can start earlier? I chat to people every day of the week about property investing here in Southeast Queensland, and I see a lot of 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who wish they could go back 20, 30 years and buy earlier. It's a scary thing to spend, your life savings on a big property investment. And that's why it's so important to get that property decision right with your first place. And so taking action and starting early is definitely going to set you up because you have more time for compounding growth to take place. This leads me into the next phase of our journey. And this is taking some extreme measures in your 20s to set yourself up for success towards your 30s. Now, we're not going to live forever, and so you don't want to ruin your 20s just to be wealthy and have tons of money in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. But there is something to be said for delayed gratification and sacrifice in your journey. Now, for Emily and I, we definitely sacrificed compared to some people around us. Like I said earlier, we rented a much cheaper apartment than we could have spent money on because we were wanting to save that extra $80 to $150 per week rather than paying that money on rent. We also took on a number of other extreme measures, like working multiple jobs while we were trying to save money. So I used to work as a professional musician, playing at pubs and bars. I would referee soccer on weekends, and I would also work my full-time job. We also tried our hand at multiple different types of businesses. We tried to start a clothing company, which was a bit unsuccessful. I tried my hand at shares and stocks and actually lost a little bit of money on my capital because we pulled that money back out to use those funds for a deposit on a property purchase. But if you can create some additional income through other investments while you're looking to save, or active income by taking on part-time or second jobs, then that's a great way you can save more money. You also should probably live more like a minimalist, having less stuff, being less consumeristic, and saving more of your money because of that bigger vision and that bigger picture. We certainly try to reduce our spending on takeout, on clothing, even on frivolous spending, unless we were really excited about something. It doesn't mean you don't have international trips and you don't go and do a Europe trip and have some holidays. But can you backpack, or can you find more affordable accommodation, or can you get discounted flights when you do travel? It's about being realistic with what you can afford and trying to spend a minimalistic amount on each of those activities as you go along. This really adds up when you save $50 to $100 each week on takeaway and you spend less on clothes and you spend less on your travel. This really adds up into thousands and eventually tens of thousands of dollars as you're looking to save a deposit. Now, one thing that I don't think is touched on when people talk about taking extreme measures is actually continuing to do your research and learning throughout that process. I know so much more today than I did at the ripe old age of 21 when Emily and I first got married and we were starting to save for our first property. And so you are going to have to learn along the way. You don't need to know everything. You can leverage off someone else's knowledge like myself, or watch tons of YouTube videos out there, or read books. And that's what I'd encourage you to do. I'm literally sitting down shooting a video right now about taking extreme measures in your 20s. That's what the video's called. Yeah, mate. You're definitely up there in terms of our clients who are kicking goals. You've done really, really well. Yeah, and that's right, and it's your limit, right? Like, you're not running anyone else's race, it's for you. I was just interrupted by a previous client who was giving me a call about one of my recent deals that I purchased, which is very similar to a deal that he purchased. And he was calling to pick my brain, and he's going through some continuous learning. He's asking about granny flats, about subdivisions, and that's what happens when you get more advanced in your property investing journey. You're going to start out needing to learn the basics. What is an LVR? What's an LMI? What's an FHSSS? But if you're a long-term property investor, you'll start understanding the basics, and then you can get more and more advanced. Then we start talking about land tax planning, about trust structures, about liquidity, about working with brokers and banks to maximize your serviceability and continue your borrowing capacity to build a bigger and bigger asset base while managing your risk. Now, it's really important to work with a broker because they can educate you heavily on the finance side. My broker, Nevada, from Cube Home Loans, can even show me on screen what each of the banks will actually lend me in terms of serviceability or borrowing capacity when we sit down together and look at our scenario planning. And that's how you can look to take steps in your property journey. Now, continuing with our story, after we bought property number 1 in 2018, we purchased property number 2 and 3 very quickly. So it took about 2 years from property number 1 to buy property number 2. So we bought in 2018, and then we had to continue to save, renovate, add value to our first place, and then we were able to buy property number 2 in April 2020. Now, this was the beloved Baby Queenslander and the reason we started this YouTube channel. So if you're an original subscriber and go all the way back, you'll see that renovation series where we started the channel and we documented our progress on that property. Now, we made a lot of mistakes. And this leads me into point number 3 about being a bit more extreme in your 20s, is you're going to need to overcome challenges through problem solving. Now, we ran into a lot of problems because we were newbies. We'd never done a full renovation by ourselves. Yes, we'd started on our first place and done a little bit of renovating, but property number 2 was a full cosmetic renovation on a very bare budget. Now, we tried to save as much money as possible when we were renovating the Baby Queenslander. It was located at 25 Leach Street in Everton Park on the north side of Brisbane, roughly around 9 to 10 kilometres north of Brisbane CBD. So a fantastic area. This was right at the start of COVID, so we had a bit more time on our hands to do some DIY renovating, but we made a fair few mistakes. We used the wrong paint. We bought some paint off a Lloyd's auction online thinking we were saving a lot of money, but it turned out all that paint was terrible, and we ended up wasting an entire day of labour plus the purchase of that material because the paint was no good. And so we made mistakes throughout that renovation. I remember tiling for the first time and actually did a decent job, but it took a lot of time. And we had a very small budget. We did it for about $30,000 to $40,000 that first renovation. And so it might not be renovations for you, but you're going to need to overcome challenges as part of your investing journey throughout your 20s. And even if you're not in your 20s, wherever you are starting today, it's about being willing to take on problems and find solutions. And in finding solutions, you can create more wealth faster than the everyday Aussie who's not willing to take on this type of difficulty. So these weren't the only setbacks we faced. From property number 2 to 3, we almost missed out on buying our very own home here on the south side of Brisbane in Greenslopes. Now, it was really disappointing. We were working with a broker at the time who's rather big here on YouTube, and they have a lot of subscribers. And at the time, we didn't really have much of a following online. And we'd sat down with this broker and we'd gone through the process of getting our finances in order, ready to buy our third property. Now, it had only been about 6 months since we'd bought our Baby Queenslander, our second property. And so looking to buy this third property in September 2020, we sat down with the broker and wanted to refinance property 1 and 2 to pull out equity and buy property number 3, which is now our own home. What ended up happening was a massive setback. That broker that we'd worked with from YouTube unfortunately dropped us 7 days into a 14-day finance period, which is honestly unbelievable. And we only had 7 days to try and find finance, or we could have lost this property. Now that would have cost us somewhere to the tune of around $500,000 in terms of market gains, based on where we sit today in 2024. And so we didn't take no for an answer. And I was on the phones constantly working different options in terms of broking and financing at the time, which we call the Triple Gable Queenslander. And now we've raised it. We're calling this property Growing Gables, which will be our renovation series, which drops in less than 3 weeks time, which we're super excited about. Now, what ended up happening is I found a solution. I actually called CBA, who was my current bank at the time, and they were actually willing to refinance property 1 and 2 to help us buy property number 3. So I can't fathom why the brokers that we were working with, I won't name them, but the brokers that we were working with were such an issue and dropped us about 7 days into that 14-day finance clause. CBA miraculously, with all the information fed to them quickly, were able to do the finance within 7 days, and we didn't miss out on buying this property. So at this point in time, we've got 3 properties to the value of about $3.5 million. And this is 2020, so about 4 years ago. So we're about 26 years old at this point in time. The property portfolio then grows massively. And this is where you can build. And this leads me into step number 4, which is building your property portfolio. It's about not taking no for an answer. You'll need to overcome those challenges, but then it's also about having the vision of where you can go to from here. And I had that vision. I'd done my research, we'd started early, we'd maximized and sacrificed to speed up our journey and overcome those challenges. And so from here, we were in a really good position to build on our property portfolio with the base that we had. And so I generally like to focus on growth properties first and cash flow properties second. So we renovated this Triple Gable Queenslander in 2020 and early 2021. And by late 2021, we were ready to make our next purchase. Now, what we did in around September 2021 is go back to our broker at the time and refinance each of those properties and pull out as much equity as we could. So against our first property, we pulled out $250,000. Against the Baby Queenslander in Everton Park, we pulled out another $250,000. Our Growing Gables home pulled out another $250,000 based on market growth and based on manufactured value. This gave us a pot at the age of 27, I was at the time in September 2021, of $750,000 in our bank account. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know many 27-year-olds who have liquid cash of $750K sitting in their account. And it was a blessing to be there at that point, but also because we'd taken those extreme measures to get to that point. And it was very important, the next step that we took. And we decided to buy a cash flowing asset. We tried to buy a unit block at Burleigh Heads on the peninsula, which was way out of our budget in the end. It sold for about $2.2 to $2.3 million. But we had the option of going with CBA, who were going to give us $800,000 of borrowing capacity, or we had a chat with Pepper Money, who were willing to give us $2 million of borrowing capacity. So when you're looking to build the property portfolio and brokers or banks start saying no, look at your other options. Now, of course, you need to balance your risk and balance your risk profile on how far you want to go in terms of expanding the portfolio. But for us, taking that $2 million rather than taking $800K gave us a lot more market exposure. And so that's exactly what we did. We ended up buying the unit block in Coffs Harbour. It's around 1,000 square meter block with dual street frontage, and the property has a house and 3 units on the block, bringing in a very strong income. We knew with the Coffs Harbour unit block purchase that we could add value again, which is a strategy we'd used in the past, and we knew that the market was going to continue to grow in an area like Coffs Harbour, being a major regional hub with a diverse economy and around 100,000 people in the wider area. And so those were our key criteria when looking at different towns and different options to diversify our property portfolio. Look at your own journey and look to continue to build the property portfolio, even when brokers and banks and people say, no, you can't go any further. We took the risk and it gave us that balance in our property portfolio between growth and cash flow. So by the age of 27, we had created over a $5 million property portfolio, which is rather mind-blowing. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's a lot of sweat, hard work, tears on occasions, and things can and will go wrong. Now, for Emily and I, we have changed our expectations over time. When we were green and starting out, we thought things would go well and go rosy. Now we're the opposite. We're not pessimists, we're generally optimistic, but we are willing and accepting that things can and will go wrong on our projects and on our property investments. And because we have that mindset, when a window breaks or a dishwasher explodes or things go wrong in your property journey, you have that mindset that things can and will go wrong, and you're willing to address those issues because you've got the buffers in place. Now, Emily and I have been blessed to continue growing our property portfolio and to help people through the buyer's agency here at Purpose Properties acquire their own home or investments here in the Greater Brisbane market. And we just purchased 2 properties this year, which helped us expand our residential property portfolio to over $7.5 million. Now, it is an absolute blessing to be in this position at the age of 29, and I know I've got only 6 days left, so tears, essentially. I'm about to turn 30, but it's also exciting that God's put us in this position, that we have the opportunity and the abundance to work with, and we have the opportunity to help and bless others. This journey of building a multi-million-dollar property portfolio was never about being what the world would say is wealthy, or having flashy cars and massive extravagant holidays and always flying first class. In my opinion, it's been a lot of hard work and about enjoying more time with family and friends and working on things that we're passionate about. And that's the position we're lucky enough to be in today. And so I'm going to be launching a Christian podcast soon, which will be released probably in November this year. So we've been able to create more choices that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to make because of our property portfolio. Now, as I said at the start, this is probably a bit of a long video, but if you stuck with me around to this point, I just want to touch on a few closing points around doing this in today's market. It is difficult, no matter what market you look at. If you look at the 2020s, the 2010s, the 2000s, there's always been news and media saying it's difficult to break into property. Young people can't buy property anymore. It's too hard. There's always ways around breaking into the market. And if you're willing to take on a lot of hard work and to sacrifice and to be a little bit extreme, then it is possible. So if I was starting in today's market, I'd be looking heavily at rent vesting or buying in more affordable markets. If I'm living in Sydney and Melbourne, I'd be maybe looking at buying in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane if I want to stick to the metro markets, or major regional markets like Coffs Harbour, where Emily and I purchased. So it's about changing your strategy and your approach to suit where you're at in this current time and to suit where the market's at based on interest rates and based on your serviceability and what you can borrow from the banks. The thing is, if you don't use your serviceability, you will potentially lose it. So when you've got that serviceability in place with CBA and then pepper money down the track, then look to use those serviceability while managing the risk to give yourself that market exposure and to give yourself the opportunities to see your property portfolio compound and grow. Now, if you're wanting a detailed step-by-step guide and you're interested in building a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, Emily and I have created a real estate investing course called Invest with Purpose. It talks through the step-by-step process of building that multi-million-dollar property portfolio and exactly how we did it in detail. And for the next 20 people who sign up, we're going to be offering 20% off the course. I've already tried to price the course at a much more affordable price point. It's less than $1,000. And the reason is we want it to be more accessible to more people, to help more people create more choices in their life and to do things that they're passionate about. The reason we called our business Purpose Property is because every property has a purpose in your property portfolio, and buying property can help you live out your purpose. So if you're interested in picking up our real estate investing course, head over to purposeproperty.com.au, put in the code 20, so TWENTY, and you'll get 20% off the course today. And hey, I'm going to continue to put out free content here on YouTube if you're not interested in that type of thing, which is awesome. So if you could do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video. And yeah, one more thing. YouTube really thinks you'll like this video right here. So give that a click. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.